I never thought that at 44, I'd be in bed with a woman 2 decades younger than me, and definitely not out of spite. But life has a knack for tossing unexpected challenges our way. Harsh, soul-crushing challenges. But before I get too carried away, let me start from the beginning. So, here's a bit about me. My name's Sam. I'm your average middle-aged guy. Nothing particularly remarkable about me. At least not until everything hit the fan. I've been married to Melissa for 16 years. We met in our late 20s back when I was a bit more hopeful and didn't have so many gray hairs. Melissa had this incredible ability to brighten up any room and make everyone feel special, and I love that about her. She made me feel like the luckiest man alive. Our marriage? Well, it was what it was. Not perfect, but then again, which marriage ever is? We had our fair share of highs and lows, but I never thought it was anything we couldn't manage. We weren't the type to constantly gush over each other. And yes, we had our arguments, but we always found our way back to each other. Or so I believe. Now I see I was just another naive husband, convinced that everything would work out if we just kept pushing through. And then there's Jason, my so-called best friend. We've known each other for almost 20 years, dating back to when we used to work together. The guy's been through hell. Lost his wife in a car crash about 10 years ago, leaving him with their daughter, Emma, who was only 10 at the time. I remember how devastated he was. That first year, he could barely function. Melissa and I were there for him every step of the way, especially Melissa. She practically took on a motherly role with Emma, trying to fill the gap left by Jason's wife. Emma spent so much time at our house. It was like a second home to her. She called me Uncle Sam, and over time, she felt comfortable sharing things with me that she wouldn't tell her dad. You know how it is. Teenagers aren't always open with their parents. I saw her as a little sister, and she probably saw me as more of an older brother. She'd come to me with her teenage drama, boys, school, everything. Jason seemed to appreciate it. At least I thought he did. They lived nearby, so they'd often drop by without any prior notice, just like family. It became the norm. In fact, Jason was practically a permanent fixture in our home. But what I didn't realize was that this familiarity would eventually take a much darker turn. And then one day, it all fell apart. I wasn't supposed to be home that day. I was at work, slogging through the usual grind, when a sharp pain hit my stomach out of nowhere. My boss, a decent guy, told me to head home for the rest of the day. So I did, planning to crash in a bed and sleep it off. Except I never made it to my bed. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Jason's car parked there. Not unusual. He often left it there when he'd pop by, have a drink, or chat with me. But something felt off. Maybe it was intuition, maybe paranoia, but something didn't sit right. The front door was locked. Now, that was odd. We lived in a quiet neighborhood where doors were usually left unlocked during the day, especially when we had guests. But there it was, locked. So I used my keys to let myself in, and everything was eerily quiet. And then I heard it, faint at first, but unmistakable. The sounds of moaning, gasps, and muffled voices. My heart stopped. My brain refused to process it. No, this can't be happening. But it was. I didn't think. I just acted. My legs moved faster than my mind could follow. I headed upstairs, each step feeling like I was walking deeper into a nightmare. I didn't go up there empty-handed. I grabbed a bat from the closet on my way, knowing someone was about to pay for this. When I reached the bedroom door, I stood there for what seemed like an eternity, and then I pushed it open. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. There was my wife of 16 years on top of my best friend. They froze, their faces drained of color when they saw me standing there with the bat. Melissa's mouth was agape, but no words came out. Jason scrambled off the bed, looking like a frightened animal. I didn't say a word. I just walked up to him and slammed the bat down onto the floor, cracking the wood. He flinched, but I wasn't aiming at him just yet. I didn't need to say anything. The look of betrayal on their faces said it all. Melissa, always quick to manipulate, finally found her voice. Sam, wait. Don't do anything rash, please. Let's talk. Talk? After this? I dropped the bat on the floor and punched Jason square in the face. And again, and again. The third punch split his lip, blood trickling down his chin. Melissa screamed, trying to pull me off him, but I was beyond caring. What the hell, man? Jason finally shouted, panic in his eyes. Sam, it's not what it looks like. How long? I growled, my voice trembling. How long has this been going on? Neither of them could answer. Pathetic. I didn't wait for their excuses. I left. I grabbed the bat, walked out the front door, and smashed the windshield of Jason's car, dented the hood, and broke the side mirrors. All I could think was, how the hell did it come to this? I got into my own car and drove off. At first, I had no idea where I was going, but then it hit me. I needed a drink. No, I needed to get absolutely hammered. So, I headed straight to the bar. The one place where everything seemed to make sense, where the world didn't feel so upside down. I walked in, still clutching the bat like it was my last defense against the chaos that had engulfed my life. The usual crowd was there, nursing their drinks and lost in their own worlds. I didn't say a word as I slid onto a stool at the counter, but I could feel their curious stares. It's not every day you see someone like me showing up at noon, especially looking like I'd just returned from a battlefield. Whiskey, I muttered, not even bothering to look at the bartender. He didn't need me to. He knew exactly what I wanted. Gary was the bartender's name. He was a solid guy, seen it all over the years. He'd been behind that bar forever, always ready with a wisecrack or a listening ear, depending on what you needed. He didn't ask questions, just poured the whiskey and set the glass down in front of me. I tossed it back in one go, barely feeling the burn as it slid down my throat. By the time I was on my third glass, Gary leaned in, raising an eyebrow. Everything all right, Sam? Not like you to be here before dark. His voice had that steady, knowing tone, like he'd heard 1,000 tales of woe before. But there was a touch of genuine concern in it. Nobody had ever seen me like this. Not in all the years I'd been coming here. I let out a bitter, short laugh that sounded more like a bark. You ever walking on your wife screwing your best friend? Gary's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't seem shocked. It was like he'd heard it all before. Damn, he said, whistling low. That's rough, man. Rough doesn't even begin to cover it. I muttered, swirling the whiskey in my glass and watching the amber liquid catch the light. I stared at it, hoping it might somehow provide an answer, make sense of everything. But it didn't. Nothing did. I don't know why I spilled everything to him. Maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe I just needed to unload before it tore me apart. But I told him everything, every single detail. About walking in on them, the shock on their faces, the sound of that bat hitting the floor. I talked about smashing Jason's car, the punches, and how it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Gary listened without interrupting. When I finished, he placed a heavy but reassuring hand on my shoulder. That's a shitty situation, man. No other way to say it. I nodded, staring at the empty glass before me. Shitty didn't even begin to describe it. But listen, Gary said, leaning in a bit closer. The key thing here is not to fall apart. Don't let them get the best of you. I looked at him, absorbing his words. What would you do if you were me? Gary didn't hesitate. Me? I'd probably do exactly what you're doing now. Get plastered, maybe break something. Hell, let's make that official. He grabbed a glass, poured himself a whiskey, and clinked it against mine. To shitty friends and cheating wives. I smirked at that, the first real emotion I'd felt all day. We both downed our drinks in one gulp. But after that, he continued, setting his glass down with a thud. I'd want revenge. The kind that leaves them with nothing. Take everything from them. Your wife, your so-called friend. Make them regret the day they ever crossed you. I stared at him. His words hit me harder than the whiskey. Revenge. It was exactly what I wanted, wasn't it? To make them suffer. To tear their lives apart like they had mine. I'll do it, I said, my voice low but resolute. I'm going to bring them down. Leave them with nothing. Gary gave me an approving nod, though his expression softened a bit. Just be smart about it, Sam. You're a good guy. Don't let this turn you into something you're not. As the hours ticked by, I got so drunk I could barely see straight. I had no clue how I'd get home, and honestly, I didn't care. I was too lost in a fog of whiskey and rage. Gary must have noticed. Before I could even think about stumbling out to my car, he snatched my keys from the counter. "You're not driving anywhere, Sam. Pick these up when you're sober." I opened my mouth to argue, but truth was, I was in no shape to fight. So I just nodded and slumped back onto the stool. "Taxi's on the way," Gary said, already making the call. When the cab arrived, I barely made it into the back seat without falling over. The driver didn't say a word, thank God. He just drove, and I spent the ride staring out the window as the city blurred by like a surreal dream. I don't remember much after that. Just stumbling through the front door of my house, the place where it all began. It felt so empty, like a hollow shell of the life I used to know. I collapsed onto the couch, still fully dressed, and passed out. The next morning, I woke up with the worst hangover of my life. My head felt like it had been run over by a truck. My mouth was dry as a desert, and every muscle in my body ached. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain. By the time I dragged myself off the couch that afternoon, my head was still pounding from the hangover. But I couldn't afford to waste any more time. I knew what needed to come next. The divorce wasn't going to initiate itself. I had to get the ball rolling. I grabbed my phone and dialed the first divorce lawyer I could think of. His name was Rick. We'd crossed paths a few years ago at a work event, and I remembered he specialized in messy situations like mine. "Rick, it's Sam. I need to talk about getting a divorce," I said flatly, not in the mood for pleasantries. "Sam? Didn't expect to hear from you," Rick responded, his voice a mix of surprise and sympathy. "All right, give me the details." I laid it all out: Melissa, the cheating, our 16-year marriage. I didn't hold back any specifics. Rick needed to know everything if I wanted to ensure Melissa didn't end up with anything. When I hung up, I felt a slight relief, though it was fleeting. That's when I noticed Melissa's laptop sitting on the dining room table. Her work laptop. She had a big presentation the next day, one she'd been stressing over for weeks. It was a crucial moment for her career, and I knew how much it meant to her. An idea popped into my head, one that would make her life a bit more difficult as part of my revenge. I sat down and powered up the laptop, sifting through her files until I found the presentation. I wasn't exactly a tech whiz, but I knew enough to cause some trouble. I browsed through the slides, trying to decide where to strike. And then it hit me. Melissa's meeting was with executives from a Korean company. I did a quick search online and found some material that could be considered offensive, subtle, but enough to cause discomfort. I inserted it into the middle of the presentation, hidden well enough that it wouldn't be noticed until it was too late. I also slipped in a few inappropriate images, placing them strategically in the middle of the slides. Not at the beginning where she'd spot them during a quick review, but deep enough into the presentation to catch her off guard during her big presentation. I wasn't just ruining her marriage. I was about to mess with her professional life as well. My head was still throbbing, so I took a couple of painkillers and lay down. By the evening, I was feeling a bit better, just in time for Melissa to come home. She walked in as if nothing had happened, probably thinking she could talk her way out of this mess like she always did. "Sam, we need to talk," she started, her voice calm, but with that irritating edge I'd grown to hate. I didn't even glance at her. "Go to hell, Melissa. We're getting a divorce." She didn't flinch. "You're a fool," she shot back, crossing her arms, probably believing I'd just cool off eventually, as if this was some petty argument over money or dinner. "We'll see who the fool is," I snapped, standing up and heading out to the porch. I didn't have anywhere specific to go, and neither did she. The house was big enough for both of us, but that night, it felt like a prison. I wasn't about to sleep next to her, so I figured I'd crash on the couch again. But I didn't even make it through the night at home. A few hours after midnight, my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was another spam call, but then I saw the name on the screen, Emma, Jason's daughter. I answered, my voice groggy. "Hello." At first, her words were slurred and unclear, but soon it became evident. She was extremely drunk. She'd been at a party and couldn't get home, so she called me, of all people, to pick her up. She didn't want her dad to know, and I guess I was the only person she thought she could rely on. So I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and headed out. When I arrived at the address she'd given me, Emma was slumped against a wall, barely able to stand. The stench of alcohol hit me as she stumbled toward the car. I opened the door for her, and she practically collapsed into the passenger seat. "What happened, Emma?" I asked, more concerned than angry. "This isn't like you." She waved me off, her head rolling against the seat. My boyfriend, he cheated on me," she mumbled, tears in her eyes, but still wearing that strange, tipsy smile. Drunk, emotional, and all over the place. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. I knew that feeling all too well. "You're not the only one who's been betrayed," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. She looked at me, her drunken curiosity piqued. "Who else?" I sighed and briefly told her about Melissa and Jason. I didn't delve into the gruesome details, but it was enough for her to grasp the situation. "Oh, Uncle Sam," she whispered, leaning closer, her hand settling on my leg. "I'm so sorry." At first, I thought she was just offering comfort, but then her hand started moving up and down my leg. My body tensed. "Emma, stop," I said, taking her hand and gently pushing it away. But she didn't stop. Even though her drunken flirtation was becoming more blatant, she kept touching me. "I want to make you feel better," she whispered, her hand making its way back to my thigh. I fought it. I really did. But the anger, the sense of betrayal, and the alcohol, it all collided. At some point, I just gave up caring. Maybe it was a form of revenge. Maybe it was the booze talking. But when she unzipped my fly and leaned down, I didn't stop her. She was surprisingly skilled. I wasn't thinking about Jason or Melissa anymore. I was caught up in the moment, relishing the twisted satisfaction of crossing a line I could never undo. Afterward, she sat back, smiling with her smeared lipstick and disheveled makeup. "There's a hotel nearby," she said in a low, suggestive tone. "Neither of us wants to go home." I didn't argue. We went to the hotel and spent the night in bed, engaging in acts I never thought I'd share with Emma. I was 44, but that night, age felt irrelevant. Somehow I kept up. The next morning, she woke me with a grin. "Let's take a picture," she said, grabbing my phone since hers was dead. I don't know why I agreed, but I did. She posed with her smeared makeup, and I took the picture, her lipstick still marking my skin. We ended up back in bed, and as the hangover kicked in, reality hit hard. I felt off, like I'd crossed an irrevocable line. I didn't regret it, but I knew things were only going to get messy. Stepping out into the harsh morning light felt surreal. Everything should have seemed normal, but the weight of what had happened hung over me like a storm cloud. Emma broke the silence first, lighting a cigarette and exhaling a long stream of smoke, seemingly indifferent. "You know," she said casually, as if discussing the weather, "you could show that picture to my dad." I stopped in my tracks, staring at her. "What?" She took another drag, glancing at me sideways with a grin that didn't fit the seriousness of her words. "I'm serious. You could show him that picture of me. I don't care anymore." I shook my head, trying to wrap my mind around her request. "Why the hell would you want me to do that?" Emma shrugged, still grinning as if it were a game. "I've wanted to get away from him for years. He won't let me go. Every time I talk about moving out or living my own life, he throws the 'you won't survive without me' nonsense at me. I'm done with it, Sam. Maybe if he sees the picture, he'll finally understand. Maybe he'll let me live my life." I just stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. This wasn't just about rebellion. It was years of feeling trapped and suffocated by her own father. And she was willing to use me, and what we'd done, to blow her life apart if it meant she could finally escape. "I'm not going to do that," I said, but the truth was, the thought had already crossed my mind. It was just another way to stick it to Jason, another way to destroy everything. "Suit yourself," she said, flicking the cigarette but into the gutter. She seemed indifferent to the consequences, as if nothing mattered anymore. "But if you change your mind, You know where to find me. I dropped her off at her place, and we didn't say much more. The entire drive back, her words echoed in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about the photo, the image of her smeared makeup, her lipstick still staining my skin. It felt like a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode. Part of me wanted that explosion. I wanted to burn every bridge, leave nothing but ashes behind. When I got home, the tension was palpable even before I walked in. Melissa's laptop sat on the dining table, a stark reminder of the revenge I had set in motion. She had no clue what awaited her that day. The presentation she'd been obsessing over for weeks, the one that could make or break her career. And now, I'd turned it into a disaster in waiting. It didn't take long for the fallout. Melissa came home just before dinner, slamming the door so hard that it rattled the pictures on the walls. She didn't even glance at me. Her face was a mask of raw, unfiltered rage. Before I could speak, she threw the laptop across the room. It hit the wall with a crack, the screen shattering into pieces on the floor. "You fucking idiot!" she screamed, her voice hoarse with anger. "You did this, didn't you?" I stayed on the couch, my calm demeanor a stark contrast to the turmoil I felt. "Maybe." She stormed over, her face flushed and eyes wild. "You sabotaged my presentation, you asshole. Do you even realize what you've done?" I didn't flinch. "Yeah, I know exactly what I've done." Her hands trembled, and for a moment, I thought she might actually hit me. "They fired me, Sam. I got fired in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what that means? No company is going to hire me now. I'm done." I raised an eyebrow. "Good." Her scream was a blend of fury and desperation as she seized the back of a chair and threw it aside with force. "You've completely destroyed me. Ruined everything. And why? Just to get back at me? Well, screw you, Sam, because guess what? I've been having an affair with Jason for years. We didn't even wait until his wife was buried. You were too clueless to notice." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd anticipated some form of betrayal, but the timing? The fact that they started their affair right after his wife's funeral? That was a whole new level of cruelty. My stomach churned, and bile surged up my throat. How could I have been so oblivious, so foolish for so long? While I was grieving with him, offering support through his loss, they were betraying me in the shadows. I rose to my feet, fists clenched at my sides. "Go to hell, Melissa." She stormed off, slamming the bedroom door behind her. And just like that, she was out of my life, at least for the moment. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. I sank back onto the couch, my mind still reeling from the chaos. That's when I grabbed my phone. I scrolled through my messages until I found Jason's name. My finger hovered over the photo of Emma for a heartbeat before I hit send. The image, her smeared makeup, the look of betrayal on her face, was on its way to him. The final blow. I didn't care what happened next. I just wanted him to feel the same agony, betrayal, and upheaval that had engulfed my life. 15 minutes later, Jason's car screeched to a halt outside my house. He didn't even bother with the formality of knocking. The door burst open, and he stormed in, his face contorted with fury, fists clenched as if ready to strike. "What the hell is this, Sam?" he roared, brandishing his phone, the image of his daughter glaring back at me. I didn't bother standing. "What do you think it is?" Without warning, he lunged at me. His fist slammed into my jaw, sending me reeling, but I retaliated immediately. We crashed into the coffee table, shoving, punching, grabbing anything within reach to inflict pain. It wasn't cinematic. This was raw and primal. Two men, devastated by betrayal, trying to hurt each other in the most visceral way possible. Eventually, we ended up on the floor, battered, bloodied, and exhausted. We lay there, gasping for breath, staring at the ceiling as if we were two broken animals who'd fought to a standstill. Neither of us spoke. What was there left to say? We both ruined our lives in our own ways, and now we were just lying amidst the wreckage. That's when I heard the sirens. 10 minutes later, the police burst through the door. One of the neighbors must have seen our fight through the window and called them in. They separated us, dragging us to our feet and out to the patrol cars. I spent a few hours at the station, mostly in silence. Neither of us pressed charges. We were too exhausted, too worn out to keep fighting. Eventually, they let us go with nothing more than a warning. When I got home that night, a strange sense of relief settled over me. For the first time in a long while, I felt a bit lighter. Not exactly better, but there was something freeing about releasing all the pent-up anger and pain that had been consuming me. I didn't care about Melissa, Jason, or Emma anymore. They could all go to hell for all I cared. In the end, maybe I was the one who burned everything to the ground. But after everything that had happened, I was okay with that. Sometimes, the only way to survive is to incinerate everything and walk away from the ashes. Melissa and I split up faster than I'd expected. After the chaos, there was nothing left to salvage. Dragging it out was pointless. There was no love, no trust, just an empty shell where our marriage used to be. It was like watching a building burn and realizing halfway through that there was nothing worth saving. We signed the divorce papers, divided the assets, and went our separate ways. A few months later, we sold the house. That place used to mean everything. Our home, the place where we'd envisioned our future, argued over trivial things, and shared some good times once upon a time. But after everything that had happened, it felt more like a mausoleum. The walls still reverberated with arguments, betrayal, and that final, ugly collapse. I was relieved when it sold. It meant I could finally close that chapter and move on. We both ended up relocating to different places. I found a small, unremarkable apartment on the far side of town. Nothing extravagant, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to have something I could actually control. I couldn't care less where Melissa ended up. As long as it was nowhere near me, I was satisfied. I knew there was no risk of running into her at the grocery store or at any of the familiar spots we used to go. We both needed space, and now we had it. Emma, though, took me by surprise. After we parted ways, she really took control of her life. She moved out of her father's place, snagged a decent job in another city, and started building a new life for herself. In a way, I felt oddly proud of her. We still check in with each other from time to time, just casual, light chats, nothing too heavy. She drops me a message now and then, and I do the same. It's strange, though. We haven't seen each other since that night at the hotel, and I think we both understand that's for the best. What happened between us was a one-off, driven by anger and booze. We both needed an escape that night, but I had no intention of turning it into something more. Some things are best left in the past. Melissa, on the other hand, didn't fare as well. The fallout from her disastrous presentation spread like wildfire. News traveled fast in her industry, and her reputation took a severe hit. Getting fired was just the start. The rumors and stories about her meltdown in that boardroom left her effectively blacklisted. She tried to find new employment, but nothing stuck. I heard she hopped from one job to another, but no company wanted to hire her. No one wants to bring on someone who's made a fool of themselves in front of high-ranking executives. What really stung was hearing about her and Jason. After everything blew up, they tried to patch things up. Maybe they thought that with their marriages in ruins, they had nothing left to lose. But a relationship built on deception isn't going to last. The thrill they felt sneaking around burned out quickly when they had to face each other openly. From what I heard, their relationship unraveled swiftly. They both fell into a heavy drinking routine, thinking alcohol would help them forget their problems. But instead of escaping, it only dragged them deeper into their misery. When you start using alcohol to numb your pain, you end up drowning yourself, not your problems. Their relationship didn't last long. A mutual acquaintance told me things reached a breaking point one night. They had a vicious argument, worse than usual. Jason hit her hard enough to land her in the hospital, and he got arrested. I don't know if she pressed charges, but he did time for it. I didn't delve into the details. I didn't care enough to know. They got what was coming to them, one way or another. As for me, life started to improve. It wasn't an immediate leap to happiness, but gradually, things began to get better. I'd always prided myself on handling things alone, believing I didn't need help. But after everything, I realized I couldn't bear the weight of it all by myself. The anger, betrayal, and guilt were like a poison eating away at me. So, I swallowed my pride and started seeing a therapist. Initially, it was tough, opening up to someone who didn't know my story. But after a few sessions, I recognized the value of it. I needed someone to help me sort through the emotional mess I'd buried. It felt like lifting a burden off my shoulders I hadn't realized I was carrying. I also returned to the bar. Gary, the bartender, had been a steady presence from the beginning, even if he didn't know the full story. One night after a few drinks, I finally confided in him about Melissa and Jason, Emma, the picture, the fight, all of it. I half expected him to judge me, to look at me like I was a monster, but he didn't. He just listened, nodding as though he'd heard similar stories before. When I got to the part about sending Jason that picture of his daughter, Gary let out a low whistle and shook his head. "Man," he said, pouring us both a shot of whiskey, "that's one hell of a story." We clinked glasses and drank. After that, we laughed about it. Not because it was funny, because it wasn't, but because sometimes that's all you can do. You laugh because if you don't, the weight of it all will crush you. Looking back, I've wondered if I did the right thing. Was all the revenge worth it? Did it change anything? Probably not. But at the same time, it gave me a sense of closure I wasn't sure I'd ever find. Melissa and Jason got their comeuppance. Emma found her way out. And me? I'm still standing. So, to everyone who stuck around to read this, thanks. I needed to get it off my chest to tell the story from start to finish. Life is messy, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel. But you deal with it, move forward, and if you're lucky, you learn something along the way. Did I do the right thing? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But in the end, I'm still here, and I'm still moving forward. That's got to count for something, right? Good luck out there, folks. Life's a bitch, but sometimes you just got to laugh and keep going.